racial thing. Everyone's got a thing going on, you know. And when it comes like,
and most of the time that stems from stereotypes that are based off statistics.
Yeah, but
when it comes to school shootings, most mass shooters are white. That's just a statistic. That's just a statistic. You can't really say that's racist or anything. That's just statistical evidence. And if you look at how cops are, they target African Americans. Well, that's because they make up 13% of the population, but commit 51% of the homicides. So cops are going to look for.
That's mostly black on black, right?
Yeah,
but it's just problems in communities, man. It's terrible.
Blacks shoot each other more significantly than any other race, and that's just because where they're set up in life, where they're at in life, and they're usually get us. That's statistics.
And the main issue I was trying to get at though is that there's these problems that each people has. You know, like Latinos got their thing. You know, blacks and Mad Mixes got their thing. I never got a gun pulled on me for being brown. You feel me? And you've had it before, and I feel bad, you know, because like that shouldn't happen, you know, and that's just, I don't know, something we got to try to work on. I'm not sure how we'll get along to it, but it's more of a social thing, you know. There's only so far laws can get, you know, but when it comes to certain social standings and people, what can we do? We can't police people's minds, you know. There's a certain level where you just can't do anything about it unless you go person to person, you know, and try to get contact. Because at one point you got to sit and talk about shit, you know. Sit down and talk about it.
Sit down and talk about it.
Well, you talked about the statistics, you know, as far as. So my question to you was, do you think that blacks are more predisposed to being violent, since they make up those statistics?
No.
And if they do, or not, then what's the reason?
I wouldn't say that you're more disposed to being violent because you're black. I would say because of how they try to establish themselves. I'm not saying, I'm saying statistically, most black people grow up in low income and housing.
And that's my question. Why would that be?
Because we can. They're going to do everything they can to survive. They're going to keep themselves.
No, but the thing is, he also mentioned the part where
which means that they will have to resort to crime.
And like
some people have to resort to crime, and that's just it.
And I understand the statistics now, but you also have to look at history and something.
Oh yeah, history.
Because like he was saying, at some point, you know, black people were being kicked down to the dirt.
I'm not denying.
No, I'm not saying that either. But like, you know, there are certain things that we have issues now. Every person's got an issue, but to like ignore the history, like you said, is just kind of is blissfully ignorant. You know, because
he is ignorant. If you don't look into the history,
because I look at it from the perspective of, you know, we talk about the statistics because the numbers are there.
Yeah,
you can do the research. You know, when you talk about the population of this country, especially dealing with African Americans, is overpopulated in the prison system. Right. And my question is, and especially when there's on a more media forum. You know, on TV, you know, they have these debates, whether it be CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, whatever the case may be, or a podcast.
Yeah.
It's always talked about the statistics. My question has always been, why is that? And that's where the conversation stops. Because it seems that there is no other argument besides that because of predisposition of being prone to that type of environment. Now, granted, the environment does hurt the person and hurts the community.
It plays a huge factor.
And there's, as far as, and I could speak all day when we start getting into the actual community of blacks and stuff like that and how we need to uplift ourselves. But the issue is this concept of keep moving the goal line.
Yeah.
And it seems like I said before, picking yourself by your own bootstraps, but you need to understand that other races, especially white in this case, have had, you know, 1,000-year head start. But then they expect for us to be on that same level, and then when you say something about it, you're saying you're playing yourself as the victim, which I've never made myself as a victim. I know Tony himself, he's never claimed himself to be the victim. We just acknowledge the injustices that happen, and we just amicably move forward and accordingly. And how we adjust. I know that I'm going to have to work 5 to 10 times harder than that guy. Just based on my circumstance and my past and just the way the social construct is working so far. Now, is it better than it was, you know, back, you know, behind the whip? Of course. But now it's a little bit more blurry.
Yeah.
Because now the enemy, in my eyes, which is the establishment and which is greedy people, is now blurred.
Yeah.
Because now it's a situation where there's this concept of, you know what, you can pull yourself out. Like, you think of it this way. I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
And I know everyone here has heard this. Is you sound white.
Oh, yes.
That right
I
there
get that so much.
is the epitome of the supremacy part. Is that talking proper or enunciating your words is labeled as white.
Yeah, and it's not just,
or correctness.
and it's not even just white people saying it. It's like other races. Like I've had
exactly.
I grew up, a real stand up kid. I've been told I'm whitewashed, and it's and why do they call me whitewashed? Because I don't use like ebonics and slur, because I knew what words like juxtapose mean. And that's the
I
problem.
don't even know what that means.
Your grammar's not perfect.
Yeah, exactly. But like it's this problem where it's not just that, but it's like this perversion of not just the discussion, but winning the discussion, where people don't want to be wrong, where it's like we have this goal in mind, and we may have different objectives in the very end, but people get perverted and blurred by wanting to win and moving the goalpost. When you start making progress in one direction, but wait a minute, I don't want to look stupid, so we're gonna change it a little bit. We're gonna say this, you're gonna say that, and I think that's the worst part. Is perversion of wanting to be right. And this whole idea, and like you said, this whole
I think it deals with guilt.
Yeah,
I think that's the guilt is what can try to cover up. So when you feel guilty about something, especially something as big a landscape as this type of plight on a certain amount of people, no one wants to deal with it. Nobody wants to actually talk about it. Make amends, and that I think that's the key part, is the making amends. And I'm not necessarily talking about reparations. I'm talking about making amends and making the acknowledgement. But no one wants to acknowledge, and we're talking about this now because we can talk about individualism right now.
Absolutely.
As far as individual situations, we all right now have gone ahead and set our piece. But to me, it's even deeper than that. The system in which laws are made have bias. And bias history behind it. And I mean, we're probably going to get into that discussion here later, but I think we have to start there. And that a lot of these things that have been implemented in this country are not necessarily weren't created in the sense meant for everybody. If that makes sense.
It already has a predisposed kind of idea as to target a certain people.
Exactly, because you think about it, the war on crime. I mean, war on drugs. To me, that's total nonsense. That the idea that the country is actually at war of actually getting rid of drugs, it's nonsensical to me. When they're the ones who flooded it. I mean, you can go through the CIA operatives through the back in the early '90s, like in late '80s and stuff like that. Like that's all it is, because you think about it when you talk about the mandatory minimums. You're talking about and it's the targeting part. And you mentioned it about as far as the population of blacks in reference to the prison system. As far as a cop is concerned, now you put yourself in your mind of a cop. Okay, I need to make these arrests, or I need to patrol this area. So I'm going to patrol where the crime is. We talk about that. Why is that the crime? So now we start talking about, okay, the living conditions. Is it a 2-parent household? You start that's where they kind of stop. Where I see when they start talking about the solution, they say, okay, well, we need more fathers in these kids' lives. Or we need them not to be incarcerated. Or we need the mother to not be on drugs. Whatever the case may be. That's where the conversation ends when it comes to this. But I think you got to get deeper than that. You got to deal with the red line. You got to start dealing with the welfare system.
Exactly.
How the welfare system has been created to replace the father in the house.
Absolutely, man. I agree with that.
And I think those type of situations, once you start getting deeper, especially dealing with it's the entirety of that idea really makes up for good conversation, but no one wants to have it.
Exactly.
And they don't want to have it on the mega platforms like CNN. I know some people try to bring it up, but a lot of them get shot down because there's certain criteria that they have to meet, and they want to appease their constituents or whatever the case may be. So I understand the agenda there, because theirs has to deal with ratings. At the end of the day, regardless of what side you fall under,
you're making money.
They have to make money to make their broadcast to get the hits
keep it going.
And without that, they're not going to last.
Exactly.
So I get that. So you're really not going to get the real conversation unless you have forums like this, or just the conversations you have with people at your job or in your family or whatever the case may be. I think the biggest issue is actually talking about it and stop making the excuses.
Yeah.
Because that's where I kind of start getting frustrated, is with the excuses. Because like I said, I never use race as a crutch for myself, despite how much I should, based through the experiences that I've had.
You deserve to use a card once or twice.
But I don't, because I realize that that's not going to be to my benefit for the long term.
Exactly.
And I will never use that as an excuse. That makes me more hungry to work harder. And I just understand that. Do I wish better? Because I got kids and I want it better for them, of course. But I think we still need to be having those real conversations, where I think is absent a lot.
Yeah, that's a really